Saving the best for last, obviously. I'm sure you all expected me as well. Nicola Talon couldn't make it, so I'm the next best thing. I think I'm the reason it's cancelled, actually. No, I'm joking. Well, first of all, fair play to all the lads for organising this series of discussions on how to make Ireland a better place. I'm really excited about the potential to get great minds, and myself, to put forward outside the box ideas and suggestions to steer the car in the other direction, because I know the theme of tonight's discussion is breaking point, but I actually don't think we're at breaking point. I think we have some potential, and events like these can...
It's going to get worse.
Huh?
It's going to get worse.
It might get worse. But I just want to say, I think it's absolutely disgraceful that we have to host this event here and not on a university campus. The whole point of being a student and being on a college campus is that you listen to views that you disagree with and offer rebuttals and counter-arguments. To simply cancel an event because you disagree with the speakers is cowardice. But we will not be silenced. And we will continue to have these discussions and debates whenever the hell we want. UCD has disgraced itself, and it's not even worthy to call itself an institution of learning. Now, while they may not have been mentioned in the initial petition, a hit piece from the University Observer, the failing University Observer, referred to me as someone like Delahanty and Scallon, who has argued against the government's hate speech bill. And they unearthed this old quote from me where I described the term hatred as often used to describe a range of legitimate concerns that many in the political class would prefer not to talk about, including the tinderbox of immigration, which Ireland is now coming to terms with. I mean, clearly such sentiments would make people unsafe. I can see why. So, look, is Ireland safe? I mean, no. As it currently stands, Ireland is simply not safe. By any objective assessment, this country is becoming less and less safe. So just a few statistics, Ben alluded to them at the outset, but attempts and threats, including murder, assault, harassment, and other related offences, have risen by 30% since 2020. Robbery, extortion, and hijacking offences are up by the same percentage. Human trafficking is up by 16%. Kidnapping is up by 17%. Theft from shops is up by 27%. Theft of vehicles is up by 61%. And the importation of drugs is up by 96%. Now, why is this? How has crime increased so exponentially in recent years? Our GDP couldn't be higher. We have billions in surpluses. Ireland is so good, Rosie O'Donnell even moved here. We're all just so delighted about that. But yet, crime remains stubbornly high because we have a political class that Nick alluded to who simply do not view crime as a matter of law and order that requires strict enforcement of the law, the stick approach, but rather they view crime as a social justice issue that requires increased social support, a carrot approach, to tackle not crime itself, but the causes of crime. Remember that old Tony Blair quote? Why do people mug, stab, beat, and rob? Well, for years, we as a society viewed these things rightly as the acts of vicious and, dare I say, evil people hell-bent on destruction and wanton violence. But now, the great and the good believe that these are acts of desperation and necessity. People rob and mug to feed their families, don't you know? People assault others because they come from broken homes and require help and guidance. So the next time you are beaten senseless on the street for refusing to hand over your phone, please make sure that the perpetrator is okay and whether he needs some intervention. Sure, day in and day out, we hear judges mention when passing down suspended sentence after suspended sentence that, well, sure, he came from a good family. Sure, he had a bit too much to drink. Well, sure, he plays for the local GAA club, so he'll be grand. The whole point of the criminal justice system is to deter crime via the judiciary and law enforcement. But why should criminals stop doing what they're doing when we have a judiciary who simply have no interest in handing down firm sentences? I'm sure we all know of a certain judge who loves to hand down lenient sentences. Well, we won't name him here, we all know who he is, but let's play a game, okay? I'm going to call out a sentence, and you're all going to guess which judge handed it out, okay? Play with me here. If you don't know, I'll say. But man with child abuse material given suspended sentence. Does anyone know?
No.
Jesus, you're following very good. Man who attempted to abduct a child given a 3-year suspended sentence.
No.
Suspended sentence for a man who kicked victim in the head.
No.
Judge sentences man to 6 years for importing garlic labelled as apples.
No.
Yes. Now some may say, well sure, poor Martin Nolan. Sure, he's constrained by the sentencing guidelines, which limits what kind of sentences he can impose, particularly as it relates to imposing custodial sentences on those who possess child pornography. And yes, there is a certain element of truth to this. The Judge Nolan has to abide by the sentencing guidelines and precedents set down in 2006 when an American man caught in possession of child sex abuse material was given a reduced sentence in the Court of Appeal from the maximum of 5 years to a 6-month sentence, with the absence of aggravating factors such as the distribution of material limiting what sentence he could oppose and what future judges can oppose. But when actually reading his comments, it's quite clear that he views the type of criminal cases before him through the same social justice lens I referred to earlier. When commenting on a burglary involving a man who had 97 previous convictions, including 40 for public order offences and others for burglary and firearms and theft, Judge Nolan said, as burglaries go, this is not the most insidious, before saying, we'll see what happens. Sometimes people surprise you in a good way. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like that old Trump line, we'll see what happens. He's a great guy. In one case involving a man who even distributed, not just viewed, child sex abuse material, Judge Nolan said it would be unjust to imprison him. Now keep in mind, Judge Nolan is an ex-guard, which says a lot about the mindset of those in law enforcement these days. Which brings me to my next topic. I'm just going to ask the esteemed audience here today, who feels safe walking in Dublin City late at night? No? According to a recent survey, a mere 33% of Dubliners feel safe walking along the city centre late at night. Everywhere you turn in the city, particularly on the north side of the River Liffey, you see flagrant drug dealing, antisocial behaviour and other intimidatory behaviour that makes a mockery of the city heralded in song as a fair city. Business owners, street traders, passers-by alike describe a street indistinguishable from Caracas or Rio de Janeiro. And I think the dilapidated state of the capital city highlights the need to reinforce old policing standards. Just listen to the harrowing testimony of Paul Stanley, whose family for 6 generations have sold bouquets by the Spire on O'Connell Street, and recently described how now there is always trouble, as he lamented whether or not the torch could be passed on to future generations. Or jeweller Noel Kelly, who said the main issues are loitering, vagrancy and begging. They go unabated on the street. This is the reality facing our tireless business owners in supposedly the richest city in the world, or at least the richest city in Europe. The first point of entry for tourists getting a shuttle bus from Dublin Airport is O'Connell Street. It's like our Champs-Élysées, it's like our Times Square. The place that birthed the first mass trade union movement, the Irish Republic, named after Daniel O'Connell, is in a terrible state. I agree with you there, thanks Bertie. So what's missing? How do we prevent such depravity on our streets? Well, many of these same business owners have mentioned the lack of visible policing on the streets, with some highlighting what we see is a lack of policing on the streets. There are never any police around were among some of the quotes. During the last Dáil term, Wexford TD Paul Keogh pissed off the PC Brigade when he called out those who make life unbearable for people in the capital city, when he said that O'Connell Street is a street he's absolutely ashamed of as an Irish person. He said it's full of druggies, crime, antisocial behaviour, robberies, takeaways, alcohol and drug abuse. Of course, this is how most ordinary people would describe O'Connell Street. Yet this was too much for Dublin TD Paul Murphy, who condemned Keogh for his alleged dehumanising and stigmatising language, referring to his use of the word druggies. Yet an unnamed serving member of the Garda Síochána, who spoke to Today FM, stated categorically that the vast majority of thefts, burglaries and robberies within O'Connell Street are committed by those feeding their drug addiction. Hazel Chu, the former Lord Mayor of Dublin, who never fails to inject herself in the latest political firestorm, took offence not at the use of the word druggies, but rather to the reference to takeaways. She said, as someone who grew up in a takeaway, there is nothing wrong with them. So instead of actually discussing ways to improve life in Dublin City, the former Lord Mayor of that very city wants public representatives to be more mindful of the feelings of takeaway dishes. So instead of having a grown-up public discussion on how policing can work for everyone, we are arguing over words. The dearth of police on the beat has consigned O'Connell Street to the path of no-go status. Feeble attempts by the former Minister of Justice, Helen McEntee, to address this problem by constructing a Garda station, which barely even functions as a Garda station but a virtual tourist office, on O'Connell Street, I think misses the point entirely. It's irrelevant how many resources you have, but rather how you use those resources, which matters. The state can brag about increasing Garda numbers all they want, but unless members of the force are proactive instead of reactive, such burgeoning figures are about as pointless as a school brandishing a record number of pupils who perform terribly in examinations. The MO of the Gardaí has shifted rapidly in recent years. With absolutely no input from the public, almost overnight, the Gardaí made the decision to respond to crime instead of actively preventing crime. Community policing was historically central to policing and involved localised enforcement of the law via community engagement. Since then, the Gardaí has become ever more bureaucratic and centralised. In November 1987, community policing was introduced initially as a rural scheme, but was extended to cover most urban areas with the objective to prevent crime and antisocial behaviour and to reduce the fear of crime. But since then, successive governments have all but eliminated community policing and opted for increased centralisation of the force. Former Garda Trevor Laffin, speaking in 2016, decried the institutional and political ineptitude that essentially abolished this form of policing, when he said that community policing has been deliberately and knowingly deconstructed by a combination of incompetent leadership and political interference. Anyone who claims to know otherwise is either misinformed or being economical with the truth. The Garda itself has admitted that they have abandoned this form of policing. Now, while Laffin cites a number of policy moves as the reason for this, at its core is an attempt to modernise policing to the standards of the cause of, I would say, 90% of our problems, the Brits. Under the tenure of Drew Harris, who was appointed as an outsider following the whole Maurice McCabe whistleblower fiasco, he has furthered this centralising tendency and sought to impose British policing standards in the Republic. Being an ex-MI5 PSNI man, it's no surprise he has no respect for the particularities of Irish community policing. As such, the Garda administrative regions have reduced from 6 to just 4, and the 19 super divisions are set to replace the 28 that existed prior. This is all part of Harris's new operational policing model based off the British model, which the Scots have even backtracked on, which is opposed by members of the force itself, who are just crying out for more community policing. The centralisation of the police has spelt disaster for combating crime generally and rural crime in particular, continuing to utterly emasculate the concept of community policing, which has served the Irish people well since its inception. When examining crime levels in the overall social landscape in the United Kingdom, it simply does not inspire confidence to adopt this model of law enforcement. England and Wales has seen a 10% increase in crime in the last year. British police have a 7% success rate of reported crime. Why on earth the Gardaí would want to follow the British policing model is beyond belief. Let's not forget that Harris has also politicised the force by focusing more on thoughts than violent crime. I mean, this is a man who, following the last general election, actually said that the so-called far right's electoral shortcomings was proof that there is little support for extremist ideology. I mean, imagine an officer of the law speaking in such subjective political terms. We might as well hire him as a political pundit or something at this point. No wonder over 90% of rank and file members expressed no confidence in his position. And I honestly think that the creeping, I don't know what you want to describe it, maybe the Anglification of Irish law enforcement is a direct threat to the civil liberties of each and every single person who challenges the orthodoxy in this country. Day after day, story after story, we see someone arrested in the UK for so-called hate speech. In 2019, 9 people were arrested every day for hate speech in the UK. Now, attempts in this country to police speech failed dramatically because of the Trojan effort of some people in this room. I won't embarrass. But let us remain vigilant and understand that there is a link between increased policing of speech and a complete disregard for policing of actual crime. The only solution to lawlessness in our small towns and city streets is more visible, active, and decentralised policing. Discussions surrounding language and social stigmas attached to certain behaviours are a distraction and serve the interests of no one except small-minded ideologues. Now, I have to say, recently I have seen plenty of Gardaí on the streets, visibly policing, so credit where credit is due to Jim O'Callaghan, but this cannot be a temporary kind of Operation Citizen type event that we saw in Dublin in 2021. This needs to be a long-term proposal. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the reason why this event almost got cancelled, and that's the issue of immigration. So right now, I believe Ireland has a political elite that is so arrogant and self-righteous that they believe they can somehow buck the international trend of increased social atomization via the mass movements of people, leading to higher crime rates. Nearly every country that has seen an increase in its foreign-born population has seen a notable increase in criminality. So let's examine some of these. So from 2000 to 2023, Denmark saw a 150% increase in immigrants of foreign origin and experienced an increase in reported criminal offences, according to official government statistics, with immigrants guilty of overall crimes at 1.86 times the rate of the native-born Danes, with those of a non-Western origin 3 times more likely to be represented in the data than native Danes. Sweden is now the crime capital of Europe, having increased its share of the foreign-born population by 86%. They saw a 24% increase in overall crimes, including a 51% increase in crimes against life and limb and a 178% increase in sexual offences, with immigrants 2.5 times the rate of Swedes to be suspects of crimes. Sweden has also reported over 500 bombings since 2022, with gangs comprised mainly of migrants wreaking havoc on the previously serene Scandinavian country. Right now, both countries, not ruled by the far right, but ruled by moderate centrist and social democratic parties, are adopting a strict zero-tolerance approach to migration. But in Ireland, despite such a massive increase in our population in recent years, our police force simply refuses, as I think it was Nick, refuses to collect data as it relates to migrant crime. Now, of course, there are Irish criminals. Most of the criminality discussed here this evening emanates from native-born criminals. But why on earth would we risk importing more criminality? We should learn from our European counterparts and avoid the same mistakes. So it's. Great excuse to get water. So, solutions. It's easy to stand up here and pontificate about all the issues that we face, and it's much harder to actually come up with solutions. So, that's why I don't have any. So, no, I'm joking. So, some have suggested allowing the public, particularly women, to carry pepper spray so that they can defend themselves in public. Sorry. Okay. While I'm not opposed to this in theory, it may only work at an emotional level. I think on a more practical level, amending existing laws to allow for greater protections for self-defence might work better. A case back in 2020 stands out when assessing the merits of this proposal. So in the early hours of the 12th of September 2020, Ian Moore, along with his wife and 4 kids, were fast asleep. Outside their home, Jason Carney broke into their house. Hearing the perpetrator inside the home, Ian pushed Carney out. Following a scuffle, Ian's wife informed him that the home invader had stolen her handbag. Ian, in another act of selfless bravery, followed the perpetrator outside. And unfortunately, things got out of hand. He punched Carney once, causing him to fall to the ground and sustained several head injuries. Carney died in a coma 4 days later. Now, Ian was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment for the crime, I would say, of protecting his family. On passing sentencing, Judge Melanie Greeley acknowledged that Ian's family dearly loved him and the entire incident had collectively caused them intense pain. Yet the judge felt the need to sentence Ian, who had no previous convictions, for simply protecting his family's belongings. Now contrast this with a man who threatened to pour acid on and kill his ex-girlfriend in front of her house with her daughter inside. That same judge, Judge Greeley, sentenced him to 4 years in prison, fully suspended, having decided that his mental health difficulties and lack of previous convictions made a custodial sentence unjustified. The contrast between both sentences proves that in Ireland, the judicial system punishes self-defence and rewards unscrupulous criminality. Now, according to the Criminal Law Defence of the Dwelling Act 2011, it shall not be an offence for a person who is in his or her dwelling, or for a person who is a lawful occupant of a dwelling, to use force against another person. Given this specific incident occurred outside the dwelling, but were provoked by events inside the dwelling, maybe this statute should be amended to allow for this intricacy. I don't know, that's just me thinking out loud. If anyone has any other proposals, I'm more than willing to hear them out. Thank you.